Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's student information session on what the fall 2020 will look like at Acadia University. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure there's lots of questions about exactly how the fall will operate. We'll attempt to address some of those in this session. My name is Dale Keefe. I'm the Provost and Vice President Academic. This evening, I'm going to go through, first of all, a few housekeeping items and some introductions. There's a few others on the line with me this evening. Then we will talk a little bit about the course formats for the fall, and also talk a little bit about campus life and how activities will be on campus, because it won't be fall as normal on the campus. And then we're going to have some time for a Q&A session. There is a number of questions that have come in beforehand that we've just put on slides, and we'll go through. We will try and go through them fairly quickly so that we can get to as many as possible that are posted in the chat. So for housekeeping, we are recording this session, and it will be available live, the recording will be available on our Acadia Student Life website within 48 hours. There is a chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. Please use that to post questions when we get to the question and answer section. There will be moderated, so there'll probably be a lot of overlap between questions, so we may not post every question, and also some of them may be answered directly in the chat box. We'll try and get to as many as we possibly can that way. A couple of important dates. July 10th, you will get, that's tomorrow, you will get some information from Acadia on what courses will look like, very specific courses for the fall. You will get instructions on how to review your courses and determine what courses are in what format for the fall. So make sure to check your email tomorrow, your Acadia email. And if you're new to Acadia and you're just starting your journey with us, we really encourage you to attend the Acadia 101 Preparing for Fall webinar series. There's two that are coming up on July 15th, the co-op and study abroad session, as well as the July 22nd, there's the financial preparedness session. And finally, recommend that you follow at Acadia U News and at New to Acadia U on Instagram, and visit our student life page on acadiau.ca to make sure you have the latest updates. So with me this evening, there's a number of individuals who will be able to address your questions. I'm going to just let themselves, they'll let them say hi. I will quickly introduce each one as we sort of go around. So I'll start with Dr. Laura Robinson, Dean of Arts.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here with you tonight.
Dr. Susie Curry, Dean of Pure and Applied Science.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here.
Dr. Ann Vibert, the Dean of Professional Studies.
Hi, everybody. Good to be here.
Scott Duguay, Vice Provost, Students, Recruitment and Enrollment Management.
Hello, everyone.
James Sanford, Executive Director, Student Services.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the call.
And last and certainly not least, we have our president with us this evening, Dr. Peter Ricketts. And so I'm going to turn it over to Peter to have a few words of welcome. Peter.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dale, and good evening, everyone. What a great pleasure it is to welcome all of you, whether you're a new student who's about to join us for the first time, or if you're a returning student following the somewhat disrupted end to your last academic year. As president, I want to welcome you to Acadia and thank you so much for committing to continuing your education, your educational plans during this very challenging time. And thank you also for choosing Acadia as your university. We appreciate and value that very much. I hope that you and your families are keeping well and healthy, and I want to give a special welcome to any parents or family members and loved ones who are participating in this session today, and thank you for supporting your students. Also, I wanted to take the opportunity to thank the incredible Acadia team who are here to help you along your way. They'll be with you every step of your journey, and that's nothing new to them because they do it each year, helping students either come to Acadia for the first time or return. But this year, of course, it's really different, and so what is different is this virtual format. But I hope that we're able to provide you with good and timely information and address the questions that you have. So we are looking forward to welcoming you to Acadia in September, and we want you to have a real Acadia experience. But we are living in very different times, and living with the COVID virus is now part of our lives, and it's also part of your educational experience. And for those of you who will be traveling here in September, you will be coming not only to Acadia, but also to the community of Wolfville. And so being responsible members of the broader community, both on campus and off campus, has never been more important than it is now. Now, in fact, responsible social behavior and positive community engagement has always been an integral part of the Acadia learning experience. But today it's more important than ever as we work to live with this new pandemic reality, where personal and public health and safety are paramount. So you'll hear more about that later on. I also want to emphasize that this is a learning process for all of us. I often say that there's no rule book for what we're going through right now. But what we are doing is making sure that we can get through this together. And we are working collaboratively with our university partners, with the town of Wolfville, with the public health authorities in Nova Scotia, as well as our faculty and staff, to create an extraordinary year for you, despite the challenges that we are facing at this time and the difficulties that we'll have. But nevertheless, Nova Scotia has done pretty well in managing this virus so far, and we want to keep it that way going forward. So I know that you'll all want to be part of making sure that that continues to be the case. So this session is very much about you, and I encourage you to ask questions, and please know that you're in good hands. There are no stupid questions, there are no wrong questions. And if we don't have the answers right now, or we don't have the time to answer all of the questions that you put to us this evening, we will get to them very quickly and get back to you with an answer. But also, if you hit a roadblock or a problem that seems to be difficult to overcome, please make sure you connect with the Acadia team, because we are here to help, and it is our job to help you overcome any difficulties you may be having. In short, our aim is to have you benefit from an amazing Acadia educational experience, and yet at the same time keep you and our community healthy and safe. So thank you once again for choosing Acadia. I hope you enjoy this session, and I look forward to welcoming you to Acadia and to Wolfville in September. Thank you, and good luck, and enjoy the rest of the summer. And I wish you all the best. Take care.
Thank you, Peter. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the course formats for the fall. And then I'm going to ask each of the deans to come on in turn, and they're going to talk a little bit more specifics about how some of these things will work within the individual faculties in the various programs. So first of all, this fall, we're going to be offering courses in 3 formats. The first is on campus. This is the typical sort of experience that you would expect for university. However, things will be modified to make sure everything meets health and safety guidelines and that there's physical distancing. But these are, for the most part, will be conducted as your typical sort of on-campus type of activity. Then there's hybrid. Significant number of our courses will be offered in a hybrid format where students can either do it in person or it will be combined with a virtual learning experience. For some courses, that virtual component will be scheduled, so you may attend through a webinar or a live event or even more in like a Teams approach, depending if it's a smaller class. And then some will have on-scheduled components to that virtual aspect. And that will be where professors post content on the learning management system and you access it on your own. And then there's virtual, which is basically where all of the content will be delivered virtually. And again, this could be in a scheduled format where you will attend class but just attend virtually, or it may be unscheduled and it may be in a format where, again, you access the content from the learning management system on your own time. So I'll ask each of the deans to come on and talk a little bit about how this is going to play out within their individual faculties. And I think Dr. Curry is going to go first.
Hi, everyone. I'm Susie Curry, Dean of Pure and Applied Science, and the departments and schools that are in science are biology, chemistry, computer science, earth and environmental science, engineering, math and stats, nutrition and dietetics, physics, and psychology. So I'm going to speak a little bit for a few seconds on the on-campus delivery format. And as Dr. Keefe said, this is what you would expect in normal times at university where you're in person. And of course, your health, safety, and well-being are #1 in our minds right now. So to accommodate the physical distancing that's necessary, these on-campus classes will be the smaller classes where engagement with material is really important. And it allows you to stay safe, stay physical distanced, and be in contact and engagement with the professor, TAs, and other students. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ann Vibert, and I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Professional Studies. And Professional Studies includes the School of Business, the Department of Community Development, the School of Education, the School of Kinesiology, and the School of Music. And I'm going to just talk a little bit about one example from the School of Business as an example of a hybrid course. The School of Business has a number of hybrid courses, and what that means is that they will be holding on-campus traditional in-classroom courses of the type that Dr. Curry just described, and at the same time, those courses will be available virtually. In some cases, they'll be available virtually from the classroom. So on the schedule of the classroom through, for instance, a webinar or through a Teams site, so that you're actually virtually coming into the classroom and engaging in the discussions with the people who are physically in the classroom and the professor. In some cases, they will be available in the classroom at the same time as they're available virtually in an unscheduled way. So most of the classroom-based courses at Acadia also have an associated learning management site with them, where instructors will post materials for the course, possibly videos sometimes, sometimes lectures, assignments, and so on. Opportunities even for students to enter into discussion groups on these course sites. So the when a person accesses the hybrid course in an unscheduled virtual manner, they actually access the learning management system course. It has everything in it that is also in the on-campus course, but it allows you to work at your own speed. Although it's, you know, there are deadlines. Each week you have to have particular kinds of things completed. And there are even some courses in the School of Business that are being offered on campus, in virtual connections to the on-campus classroom, synchronously at the same time, and through unscheduled virtual connections to the course. And that's partly because in the School of Business there's such a diversity of students, some who are going to be present on campus, some who are not going to be present on campus but are in reasonable time zones to access the course live, and some international students who are in very different time zones and may need to do the course in an unscheduled way. Okay, so that's an example from the School of Business of a hybrid course.
Great, thanks, Anne. Again, I'm Laura. I'm the Dean of Arts. And in arts, you'll find English and theater, art courses, politics, philosophy, economics, women's and gender studies, environmental and sustainability studies, sociology, history, so French, Spanish, and German. And while we have quite a few on-campus courses and hybrid courses, I'm going to talk today about virtual courses and what they might look like. We'll have an option of scheduled or unscheduled. A scheduled virtual course would look like a team meeting or a Zoom hangout or something like that. You might all connect in real time together. So it would be like attending a class normally, only you would be doing it virtually. I know that one faculty member in sociology is using the virtual scheduled to have discussion groups. So she'll give lectures to people that are taped, recorded, and then everyone will come into the team's classroom to discuss the lecture and the course materials. The unscheduled might seem a little scarier because it's less, it seems like it's less contact. There's no set class time. You work when and how you like, so it's a little bit more flexible and great for people who are out of time zones, for instance. But there still is a lot of connection. There might be group work that's there. There'll be discussions on Acorn, the student platform, discussion groups and things like that. And of course, lots of connection with your professors still. Thank you.
Thank you to the deans. We're now going to talk a little bit about what campus life will look like, both campus life in general, as well as some specifics about residents. So I'm going to turn it over to James Sanford to take you through the next couple of sessions.
Thanks very much, Dale. Good evening, everyone. I have to say, Scott and I were talking earlier today about the fact that now that we're starting to really get into the idea of folks coming back to campus, this is an exciting time for us. So These next couple of slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the effort and some of the asks that we're going to have of you folks to work with us to help us create a community where everyone is going to be safe and healthy. So we'll talk about it in terms of the campus itself and as well as the residence and dining experience over the next 2 slides. In terms of the campus, as you would expect, we've created a process to increase and ensure that there's lots of cleaning, surface cleaning throughout the campus. So classrooms, assembly spaces, anywhere that students are moving, anywhere that anyone in our campus community is moving, those high contact surface will be cleaned on a regular scheduled basis. You'll also see, and I'm sure you're seeing these in your home communities, but many of our buildings and access points will have signage and other visual cues to provide guidance in terms of how to move about the buildings. If it's service areas, there'll be physical distancing guidelines and signage to ensure that everyone is clear on what they need to do and how they need to move about those spaces. We'll notice that lounges, study spaces, common areas that normally are open to students on an all-access basis. There will be some limitations to attendance and availability of those spaces for studying, for work. So those will be important pieces of information that we'll share more of once you're here and as you start to navigate those building spaces. One of the key requirements, and this is something that everyone both on and off campus is it's really important that we're asking you to pay attention to these requirements as they do change. But at the moment, any student arriving from outside Atlantic Canada who plans to live off campus is required to self-isolate for 14 days before they can come on to our campus community. So for those students that are residing off campus, you'll need to self-isolate off campus for 14 days. For those that are living in residence, we'll move you into residence upon arrival in Nova Scotia, and after 14 days, then you'll be able to move about the campus more freely. You'll expect to see both in the town of Wolfville and on campus that all of our food service or eating establishments will be following Nova Scotia health and safety directives and the public health directives that are associated with food service. So whether that is both the dining in facilities or any of our grab and go or takeout facilities, they'll all be complying with those requirements. We're working very closely and diligently with our student union. They're the providers of many of our social and extracurricular activities with clubs and organizations. So we're working with them to create a platform upon which we can share information about and or create opportunities for students to connect with those that are interested in like-minded experiences. So whether it's clubs or whether it's social activities, we'll do those both virtually. In some cases, once we've completed the required 14 days of self-isolation, those experiences will also be in person. So in terms of getting ready to be on campus, a commitment to health and safety is our top priority, and we'll be asking each of you to work with us to ensure that everyone, students, employees, visitors to the campus will all be safe and healthy. In terms of residence and dining, again, there are going to be some very specific requirements in place. We will only be assigning one student per room space, so even though we may have potentially double rooms, there will only be one student assigned, certainly for at least the first semester for the fall semester. We'll be structuring a move-in process to schedule arrivals so that we can ensure appropriate physical distancing practices. That arrival process will include limited access. The students themselves will have access to the residence buildings, but we'll need to stage arrivals and moving possessions in with volunteers, appropriate volunteers. Family members and other guests would not be permitted inside the residence buildings during that arrival and move-in process. Again, students outside of Atlantic Canada should prepare to self-isolate for 14 days. We've posted information, but effectively we're asking students to be here by September the 5th. between the 2nd and the 4th for the international students, and then by the 5th for Canadian students to complete the self-isolation period prior to the start of classes. We'll be working with all students in terms of their experience in residence, so provision of food, cleaning of washroom facilities, assigning of washroom facilities to each student, and again, ensuring that we're following all of the public health requirements. One of the pieces to that is, as with any of our rules and policies on our campus and within the community, is that we will be utilizing our student code of conduct to ensure that there is compliance with those requirements, and when required, we'll work with students to make sure that they are reminded or educated on the components, especially the COVID-19 components, that those are not nice to do's, but they are required, and those are required both by Acadia University and by the province of Nova Scotia. So we'll be communicating directly with students in more depth on residence, and in fact we'll create a similar type of an event similar to this one around the residence piece as well as we move forward. So we'll certainly be working directly with students on an ongoing basis to ensure that they're ready to arrive here, and that we answer all those questions associated with both residents move in, the self-isolation period, and then operation of residence throughout the fall academic semester. Thank you.
Thank you, James. We'll now move into the question and answer portion. So if you have a question, please feel free to type it into the chat. I see that some of the questions are being answered there as we go along. That's great. But if you have others, please type them in as we go through. We're going to work our way through the ones that were submitted beforehand. So the first question is dealing with choice of in-person, online, and remote. So I'm going to turn that over to Laura Robinson, Dean of Arts, to address that one.
Great, thank you, Dale. It's such a good question. And tomorrow, I believe you'll be getting all the modalities of the courses, so you'll be able to see how the courses are going to be delivered. Some courses will have a choice. So any of the courses that are hybrid, you can take either in person or virtually. The courses that are on site only or virtually only, you won't have that choice. But yeah, it'll still be an awesome experience. Thanks.
The next question is on how online courses will impact progression in the program. So I'm going to turn that over to Dean Ann Vibert to address.
Yeah, hi everybody. The question actually asks if if you do the courses online, if that will have an impact on your progress through the program, and the short answer is no, it will not. Faculty and academic units have taken great have really concentrated on making sure that they arrange courses for this fall in such a way that if they do have to move what would normally be a fall course out of the fall, because it can only be offered, for instance, in an in-class format, and they know that they'll have students that can't access it that way. If they've had to do that, they've done it in such a way that they will make sure that that course is available to the students who need it in a timely fashion, so that it will not affect their students' progress through the program, so that any student can get, for instance, the prereqs that they need in order to take the next step in the program. Now, if anyone should should run into a difficulty, what looks like a conflict or a difficulty around any of that, the directors and heads of the departments have really underlined that they would like students individually to contact them to work out any issues of that sort that might arise. I'm going to turn off my phone. And the other part of the question is if you happen to have all your courses online in the fall, which may be fairly unlikely, but it can happen, do I have the option to only do fall semester with online courses? And yes, if you can arrange your courses in such a way, you do have that option. So the answer to the first part of the question is yes, and the answer to the second part of the question is no. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Ann. I'll also add that right now, you know, I know the modalities and all of the course information will be published tomorrow, but it looks like about 85% of our courses will be available to everyone that's doing it, no matter whether they're on campus or virtually. So if you have to do classes remotely, you will have access to at least 85% of our classes. The next question is regarding the difference between remote and online. And I'm going to turn that over to Dean Susie Curry to address.
Hi, everyone. This is also a great question, and I think it really drills down to ask what the remote or virtual delivery model will look like at Acadia. And I think when we see online first, we think that it's impersonal and you're interacting with material that's posted somewhere with online quizzes, but that's not what the experience will be like at Acadia. So we've been thinking about it as remote delivery or virtual delivery because it will still have that personal touch. You'll be interacting with professors. Now this may be scheduled or unscheduled, but there'll be an engaging environment. You'll be interacting with other students, sometimes in breakout groups, in tutorials, problem solving, labs. There's some really interesting virtual labs and virtual lab platforms that are available. So you really want to think about this as still an engaging, personalized experience, even though we won't be in physical contact in that remote delivery option. Thanks.
Thanks, Susie. So the next question is regarding enforcing safety and health measures to control the spread of COVID-19. So I'm going to turn that over to James. Some of this was covered earlier on the when James talked through the campus protocols, but I'll turn it over to him to add a little bit more.
Yeah, thanks, Dale. And again, I think it's important that if folks want to dig a little deeper into what some of these public health requirements are, if you go to the Nova Scotia government website, the COVID-19 website, you can see all of the requirements that the government has put in place and all of the rules and expectations around that. We'll be ensuring that we're meeting all of those public health guidelines in our efforts, both on campus and in residence. And I mentioned previously, in terms of enforcing those measures, any type of university policy or behavioral guideline is subject to work through our student code of conduct. So if we have situations where there are concerns about whether someone is following those rules and those are brought to our attention, we'll work directly with those students and correct or change the behavior and deal with that at the time. We'll be taking all the necessary steps to inform and, like we are tonight, make sure that everyone's aware, answer questions about those expectations. So we'll rely on students having asked the question, but also reaching out and identifying if they need help to be able to follow those rules and safety measures as well, because oftentimes what we see is that sometimes if those are not being followed, there may be a reason that someone feels that there's something they need to take care of or something has to be done. So we'll be asking students to reach out to us and we can help make sure those things happen.
Thanks, James. The next one I can pass over to you as well because it deals with the residents.
Yeah, so in residence, some of the things that you'll see is obviously for the self-isolation period, things will be a bit more controlled in the sense that students will have very limited access outside of their residence rooms. At the moment, self-isolation under our public health guidelines means that you must remain in the room space other than the access to washrooms. Food would be delivered to the spaces, and we'll work around creating social contact and social connections there. If those requirements change, we would obviously identify, more opportunities for students, but the movement will be very limited. During the self-isolation process, no guests would be permitted in residence. As we move past that self-isolation period, the residence experience will see more contact within the residence building itself, but spaces will still require social distancing, appropriate physical distancing. We would be gradually moving to allowing perhaps students from other residences or off-campus students access to residence if that fits with the public health protocols. Non-student guests would be the last on that particular list, and so I think it's unlikely that you'll see a lot of non-student guests permitted during that fall semester, based on sort of all of our work to date. So there will be extensive cleaning protocols in place for washrooms and any shared spaces, so that we ensure that students have the safest experience possible with respect to access to those public spaces. Initially, we'll need to look at perhaps controlling access to lounges and other spaces so that we gradually open those up. We do have a common kitchen in the residence, but again, we'll need to look at whether that will be accessible immediately or something that's staged in as we feel more comfortable with relaxing some of those conditions. So, hope that's helpful.
Thanks, James. So the next one deals with the legal requirements in Canada, and a couple of aspects to this. In Canada, apart from control of the international borders and whether or not travel is allowed across the international border, everything is controlled at a provincial level. So we're working very closely with the Nova Scotia health authorities, and we're bound by what the Nova Scotia requirements are. So right now, Nova Scotia doesn't require the use of a mask, but there is talk that it may be required very soon. Certainly it's recommended. Social distancing is required in all public spaces, and anybody coming from outside of Atlantic Canada must do a 14-day self-quarantine. And one of the challenges with this entire situation is that some of these regulations change from week to week, and so we have to make sure that we're following and adhering to whatever the requirements are at that time. So right now, we're working with, as I said, the Nova Scotia health authorities, and are working within the guidelines put out by the Nova Scotia Public Health Department. The next question is around specific fees for a graduate student in the MA program. And if this student is listening on the line now, or if somebody has a similar situation to this where they can't continue their studies in a graduate program because of COVID, I recommend that you reach out to your program supervisor, to your research supervisor, or your program coordinator, as well as the Office of Graduate Studies, because we always work with students that whatever their personal circumstances are, and this is a question where it really should be addressed at that level. So this one, I think, James, I think I can turn it over to you in regards to if there's a suspected case on campus, or what happens if there is an actual case on campus.
Thanks, Dale. As part of our communication with students, we'll certainly be circulating information for students to be able to do their own self-assessment of their health on a daily basis, and certainly we'll be encouraging that. Currently in Nova Scotia, if you check yes to one of a number of different conditions, then you're asked to follow up with 811, our provincial health support service, where you can speak with a nurse. Based on their guidance, you would be scheduled for a test for COVID-19. We could support access to transportation to get to the testing site. And if there was a positive confirmation on the test, we would work with that student to quarantine them in place at the campus. It may involve moving to a specific residence or specific area, but we would look to minimize their contact with anyone else. We would work with public health to initiate contact tracing. I think the important thing to remember is that with any communicable disease, public health takes a leadership role to define our steps and actions. So they would get involved upon an immediate confirmation of a positive test. They would lead the contact tracing efforts, and they would give us direction on the best possible strategies to ensure that the student is cared for, and that any others that have either been in contact or others that might be at risk are notified and cared for as well. So all of this is done under the auspices of public health, and they would work. We would work closely with them to identify the appropriate steps.
Thanks, James. So the next question is in relation to what happens if the university dorms need to close, and where can an international student go without an alternative home in Canada? So, the short answer to this is that you won't be on your own. We will work with you. When the residences close down in March of this year, because at the outbreak, at the outset, of the pandemic, every university pretty much in the country went to a virtual setting, and residences closed down. We didn't throw out any students on the street. We made sure that students had somewhere else to go, or we worked with them and let them stay in the residence. And in fact, there are a number of students who continued into our residence, and we still have a small number of students in our residence right now. So no, you won't be left on your own. We will work with you, and whether you are an international student or a domestic student from another part of Canada, we will work with you to make sure that you have somewhere to stay. And if you can't find somewhere to stay, we will make sure that we can accommodate you within our campus. Scott, I think you were going to address this one around borders. The enrollment advisors and your team have been working with and are well aware of what's going on in the visa situation. So I'll flip this over to you, Scott.
Yeah, currently have the borders open to accept international students. Yeah. Right now, it's not the case. I mean, I know the timelines are getting really short for international students to get all the documentation they need. And unfortunately, we don't really, as an institution, don't have control over those timelines. So, definitely recommend reaching out to our international team to get more information. We're working with our international students on a weekly basis and hoping to keep them informed. There are options for students to take courses online if they cannot make it to Canada for September. And, we were getting questions about joining us in January as well, which, we want to make sure we're accommodating. So best thing right now, and unfortunately we don't have all the answers, it's really something that the federal government controls, would be to reach out to international@acadiau.ca, and that will put you in contact with our international team.
Thanks, Scott. So the next question is, what happens if the travel restrictions within Canada change, in particular regarding Ontario, but I'll address it in general. So right now, the travel restrictions are that if anybody comes to Nova Scotia from outside of Atlantic Canada, so Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, or Newfoundland and Labrador, that they have to self-isolate for 14 days. And that's a provincial requirement. We don't know if or when the provincial government will change that requirement. There is some talk that they may open up a Canadian, restrictions, remove Canadian restrictions by the end of July. But that, at this point, it's just speculation and rumor. We don't know for sure if they will do that or when they will do that. But if they do, we will adapt accordingly. But right now, the best information is that anybody from outside of Atlantic Canada will have to self-isolate for 14 days. And so we're asking people to prepare for that and assume that they will have to isolate for 14 days. So again, this is depends on the situation. So if our students allowed to be to go home for holidays such as Thanksgiving, right now outside of Atlantic Canada, it wouldn't be practical, because if you go home, you would have to self-isolate when you come back for another 14 days, and that would really impact your ability to complete your classes, and we really wouldn't have the ability to accommodate that quarantine for a large number of students at that point in time. But again, it depends on the provincial regulations. If there's travel restrictions are changed such that individuals from outside Atlantic Canada don't have to self-isolate as they come into the province, then potentially students may be able to travel during the holidays. But right now, it doesn't look like it. Again, this is a very similar question in terms of the quarantine. I think we've covered that a lot. One of the different aspects here is about students getting transportation from the airport. And so, James, maybe I'll flip that over to you, because I know you've been working in that area.
Thanks, Dale. Yes, we normally create and arrange for transportation for our international students from the international airport, and recognizing that this year is going to be a bit different for domestic students in that rather than traveling with family members or parents, they may be coming on their own. So we're looking at that as well, how we can help facilitate transportation to and from the airport to campus for those both international and or Canadian students who are arriving that require self-isolation, so that they can we can get them to campus safely and get them moved in and settled so that they can complete that process. So we're certainly willing to work with all our students on helping to arrange that transportation.
Thanks, James. The next question, will the withdrawal date be extended this year with the switch to hybrid online courses? And what about the add date? So as you probably know, we delayed the start of classes by about 2 weeks to help accommodate students who will have to self-isolate. And so as a result of that, all of the deadlines, academic deadlines, were also altered. And so without going into all of the specifics, those are now available on the registrar's website in terms of all of the academic dates for the fall. So this one deals with deferring residence to second semester, so I'll flip that one over to you, James.
Yes, so if a student has reserved a room in residence and is going to be choosing to do the fall semester online, certainly they can defer their residence occupancy to second semester, and we'll work directly with them to ensure that we have a space available for them.
Thanks, James. So the next question deals with the deferral of enrollment in the kinesiology program. So I'll let the Dean of Professional Studies, the the faculty that hosts that.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Dale. I don't know that it would be necessary to defer enrollment in the kinesiology program if you wanted to do 2 or 3 courses online, as opposed to a full course load. You could simply do 2 or 3 courses online as a part-time student in the kinesiology program, and then, you know, fully enroll in the program in January. So in that sense, the answer to the question is yes, you can.
Thank you. And then the next one deals with students' choice and decisions around entrance scholarships. I think maybe Scott, you're the best one to address that.
Yeah, so you know, the principle we've been using is we certainly don't want COVID-19 to hurt any students, so we've been finding ways to make sure we're honoring those promises and those scholarships and applications or awards. If there's a residence component in it, what's important to know is that it's applicable to residents only. So if you have a residence award and you choose not to be here in the fall, you forgo that part of the award. Mind you, if you join us in January, we will honor the second half of that award. So it's not lost. It really is, you know, we're doing what we can to make sure we honor those awards and those scholarships.
Thanks, Scott. So the next question deals with what happens if there's a second wave and all classes have to move online, and then will I get money back from residents and meal plan? So a lot of that depends on what happens, and so it's really a hypothetical situation which we would assess at the time. But if, you know, classes move to online, doesn't mean that the residents will necessarily close down or that dining hall will close. So there's a lot of depends in that question, and we're working through various scenarios to our main focus is to make sure that we can limit any potential outbreak on campus and then reduce its impact if there is an outbreak in the area. I think, you know, the answer with that is that we will work with students to make sure that they can complete their term and that they have somewhere to stay as they work through that term. So again, I think this is probably a good question for you, James.
Thanks, Dale. One of the key things that we're working on right now is that sort of social programming and extracurricular programming. What does that look like in this type of an environment? We're going to be engaging with the student union to provide leadership around some of those activities. The resident staff will be spending a lot of their training time looking at how they're going to contribute to that that effort. And in fact, our varsity athletics department is working on an alternate sport model for students who might be interested in sport activities to try and create more access to sport for all of our students. So there will be a concerted effort to ensure that we have the appropriate programming in place, and that will be supplemented by efforts that will come out of our Student Resource Center, and so around student mental health. They do a lot of group work, a lot of various activities as well, so there will be very dedicated and specific efforts aimed at ensuring that students are able to take care of not only their academic health, but their emotional and social health as well.
Thanks, James. And then the last question that was submitted beforehand is again very similar, talking about the quarantine, and James pretty much addressed this in the previous one. but I don't know if you want to add anything, Scott, around the activities.
Yeah, so one of the priorities around that is just going to be ensuring that we keep students. We'll try to do what we can. The quarantining period is not optional, so we understand it's going to be difficult for some, but what we're planning for is trying to keep everybody, finding ways to socialize all our students and making sure we have student support across the system. We'll have residence advisors that will have small groups of students to check in with on a regular basis. So we'll do it as well as possible, but it's certainly going to be challenging, and we're going to need to work with students to get through those 2 weeks. But the payoff is starting a year as safe as humanly possible, and starting off on that right foot as you're focused on just your studies rather than something like this. So.
And Scott, just in terms of the physical move-in, we'll certainly have individuals on hand to help with getting things moved in. So again, the traditional family support that often accompanies students. Parents and students shouldn't feel pressure to have to show up en masse to do that. That we can work with the student and ensure they get settled in. We've got lots of strong connections to the local business community. So if there are things that students need, supplies for their rooms, those kinds of things, we can help facilitate that both during self-isolation, but also then once students are able to move out and about, it'll be a chance to explore the town a little bit and pick up some of those items themselves. So we'll certainly make it as positive an experience as possible, ensuring that we're meeting all the public health requirements.
Thanks, James and Scott. So that's the end of our questions, and there's been lots of activity in the chat box there as we went along. I see that Scott has been answering a lot of questions, but there's still a number that we haven't gotten to yet. We will try and get to as many as possible as we work through. I know we only have a couple of minutes left, but we will commit to trying to address all of the questions in a frequently asked questions later. So the questions won't be lost, if you don't get an answer immediately and you need something, please reach out through enrollment services or to the registrar's and we'll try and address that question for you. So let me see what's there in the chat box. So the first question there I see is about late night access for studying in the library or in Denton. So those spaces we're working through right now. Certainly we're working through all the protocols for the library, but there will be access to spaces like that for students to do for studying, but obviously under very controlled settings in terms of physical distancing and the number of individuals that can be in a space at any given time. So that's certainly there will be some access. It won't be the access that was done in the past where it would just be free and open. It will now be a little bit more controlled, but there will still be access. The next question I see there is around obligation for a first-year student athlete on a athletic scholarship. So I think, the short answer from the university's perspective, if you're studying, we will honor your scholarship, but you should reach out to your coach or to the athletics director because there could be very specific requirements around the particular sport, and not all of the sports have been canceled yet. Some of them still have plans for the winter, and things will be assessed as we go along. I think in the best situation there is to reach out to the specific coach and get further direction in terms of what are your requirements. How will these changes to classes and campus life affect tuition fees and cost of residence? So right now, tuition will be the same for all courses, whether they're on campus or whether they're done hybrid or virtual. For fees, we are looking at some very specific fees because there are certain fees that are connected to being on campus. And so obviously if you're doing classes remotely, those fees may not apply. We're looking at that right now, but any changes to fees or anything like that will be posted as we go along. So the next question deals with the health coverage for COVID treatment, and medical attention to be required. The short answer to that is yes, but I can turn that over to James to talk a little bit more about the health plan.
So I've not had any indication that that there are changes to the health plan. I'm going to bring this question to our health plan administrator within the student union and ensure that we follow up on it. But there have not been during the changes that started in March. We've been in contact with the health plan providers, and there have been no changes up to this point. Students coverage continued through the summer months, so we've not been informed, and I'm not anticipating any changes. But I'll make sure we ask that specific question and get the answer posted.
Thanks, James. So maybe we'll go one more question and then we'll wrap up this session because we're already a couple of minutes over time. So the next one is, students, if they're studying virtually, how will they get their textbooks? So we're working with a couple of components there. Faculty and staff are going to get information out to the students as soon as they can around what the requirements are for their specific courses. And then students will have several different options. In some cases, students may be able to order content, books or whatever from a third-party supplier. But we're also working with the library and with the bookstore to make sure that we have the ability to get materials out to students who are not physically on campus. So again, thank you very much everyone for attending this evening. I know we didn't get to all of the questions. There's still a number there in the that have been posted that we haven't gotten to. We will keep those, we will address them, and if you've posted with your contact information, we'll try and get back to you specifically. If it's been an anonymous post, then we will do an FAQ and post it to our website. So I will remind you of a couple of things as we wrap up. So tomorrow, look to your Acadia University email address for further information around the course format, details for all of your courses, and to check and make sure that you're registered for the courses that you want in the format that you want. For new and returning students around orientation for the fall, expect to receive further information over the next number of weeks. And so again, it's important that you check your email as well as stay in contact through the website and social media updates. If you have more questions, please look at the Student Life page. There's lots of information there. And if you don't find the specific answer there, please don't hesitate to reach out but also check back to that page because we're constantly updating it as we get more questions and that come in and as more information is determined about exactly how the fall will look. So again, I want to thank you all for attending. I really look forward to meeting as many of you as possible in the fall once you come to campus, if you're coming to campus, and hopefully meet some of you virtually if you can't come to campus. And then when you do get to come to campus, I look forward to meeting you then. So again, thank you for attending, and thank you to all of my colleagues for taking time out of their evening to present and to address your questions. I hope you all have a great evening and a good weekend. We look forward to seeing as many as possible in the fall. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.